You're listening to the Brown Sign Project podcast. Every journey a visitor takes through your attraction should immerse them in your values and heritage and leave them wanting more. Stephen Spencer and Associates are a team of highly experienced tourism and retail aficionados who will help you develop a sixth sense in order to maximize every opportunity. We're here to help you build and engage your team to own and enhance your visitor experience. Above all, we're here to help you increase your profitability in these challenging times because people become engaged team members and loyal customers when they love your attraction as much as you do.
Welcome to the Brown Sign Project, the podcast that opens up the Tensor barrier and takes you behind the scenes of the tourism industry. I'm Carly Strawn.
And I'm Carlton Gadjadar. In this episode of the Brown Sign Project, we have a great conversation with Lucy Handel, a marine biologist working in health and safety within the tourism industry. As always, we'll talk to her about her career path, but Lucy will offer some great advice of how not always taking the direct path can enhance your skills and open up more possibilities.
Lucy is also a great advocate of mentors sharing their knowledge in order to create a great team, and talks about how that rewards everybody in the process. But just before we get to our chat with Lucy, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Staff Savvy and Stephen Spencer and Associates. I'd also like to point out that Carlton didn't take part in this conversation, and it's just because he's too busy doing top secret work, as usual, but nothing to worry about. He'll be back next week. Hi Lucy, really nice to see you.
Hi.
For those, I'm seeing you, but for everyone else, obviously they can hear you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I am Lucy. I guess at heart, I am a marine biologist, a big animal lover. I currently work in health and safety in the tourism and attractions industry. And I've had quite a varied journey to get there. I started working in the diving industry abroad in tourist areas. I guess probably the best way to describe that would be kind of beach resort tourism. And then started working mostly in the aquarium industry, which then led me into a slightly different career change into health and safety, but with a big part of my job scope is kind of looking after aquariums and diving and the animal kind of handling side of things. So that's me.
Awesome. Which kind of brings me to, I guess, the icebreaker question for everyone this season, which is, what job did you want to do when you were a child? Because I think have you always wanted to do that? Have you always been a diver?
I pretty much have always been really interested in that. I had a brief period of time where I was quite young and I wanted to wash the oil off of birds after oil spills.
Wow.
So still involved in animals. And I think as I got a bit older, I realized that maybe wasn't a specific job, whereas there's other elements that come into that. But I've always been interested in the marine world and things like that. Actually stemmed from an odd place. When I was quite young, a babysitter probably incorrectly showed me the movie Jaws, and I just became absolutely obsessed with sharks. I think I went kind of the opposite way to most people that see those.
Yeah, most people who watch Jaws don't root for the shark.
No, they're completely wrong, obviously. So from a really young age, and I count myself really lucky that I, every day pretty much get to do a job that I'm interested in and passionate about, and that's definitely the reason I've stayed and also diversified as well, I think.
That's awesome. You've made me think that is a very specific point in time of when you were a child, of birds having oil washed off them. For our younger listeners and maybe some of our older listeners, they're going, that's a really niche thing. But I remember as a kid that being like really big news, that being
lots of oil spills. Yeah. I remember going into work with my mum. My mum's has always been in the medical profession, and people are always saying to me, "Oh, do you want to be a nurse like your mum?" And saying, "No, I want to wash oil off of birds." And I think probably I'd quite like to see those people's faces again now, just to see their reactions, as I'm sure they were quite varied.
Probably a bit closer to washing oil off beds than you are to being a nurse, I guess. You were right.
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so.
So in terms of, you said obviously you've had a bit of a varied career. What qualifications do you have, and did they impact your career? Which it sounds to me like they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I having picked what career I wanted as quite a young child, I've engineered my qualifications to get me into those industries, which has definitely helped. So I started off diving when I was quite young, and then did my instructor courses while I was at university, which has really helped. And obviously in terms of my first jobs out of uni as a diving instructor, that was absolutely a necessary qualification, and something that helps me every day at work, and has done in the aquarium industry, especially when you look at certain things now that are coming in, like helmet diving experiences, discover scuba dives that various aquariums all across the world offer. Having that knowledge really helps from a kind of commercial point of view, but then also from an animal welfare point of view, in terms of just being able to clean a tank and maintain it and have that better view of animals in certain environments, has really helped. And then I went on at university to do a degree in marine biology, which I absolutely loved. I loved being surrounded by people that had the same interest as me, which I just didn't have that at school. And yeah, I mean, fundamentally, those things absolutely got me hired into my first jobs in the tourism industry and working in aquariums.
And what was your first job? What was the first job that you did?
My first job I in the tourism sector, I think, was working for a resort in Greece, teaching people to dive, or doing discover scuba diving experiences, not necessarily full courses, which was a seasonal job in the summer. So I think it was almost straight out of university, because I had to come home for my graduation. And I loved that. It was brilliant. It was definitely something I'd recommend, if people had the opportunity to go and work abroad and, meet loads of people. And I still have friends, from that time in my life that I'm very close with now. I guess my first proper job, with, having a contract and a salary and things like that, would be working in an aquarium. So I was recruited as an aquarist, which is kind of like your first starting role in animal husbandry and animal welfare. So doing things like water chemistry, feeding, making sure the animals, have everything they need. So that was kind of how I got into it, and just absolutely loved it and carried on, really.
That's awesome. I think you get the slap on the wrist for saying proper job.
I do, yeah.
Which I do. We're all very, very guilty of saying, oh, I did this other thing until I got a real job, but that actually, in all jobs are real jobs at that point.
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't change it for anything. And I think that's probably hearing my mum and dad's voices of, have to get a pension and do these things, which, stuff like that's important, but ultimately doing what you love and what makes you happy is the best thing.
Which I guess is kind of covers our next question, which is, what advice would you give yourself if you could speak to Lucy, who's about to embark on her first trip to Greece? What's the advice that you're giving her?
It's a really good question, and I think that probably not specific to that first job, but my career as a whole, as it's gone on, would be to be your authentic self. I think that until you're completely authentic, you can't ever really feel truly confident in what you're doing, and you end up holding yourself back in certain ways. And I don't have regrets or resentment, but I did go through, you know, a large chunk of my career, I think earlier on, thinking, yeah, I needed to be a certain way, or I needed to communicate in a certain way to get to this point. And whilst I absolutely think there's flex in communications that you need to have, and that's a great skill to learn, you still need to be yourself. And when people can see your true self, you end up being surrounded with people that you get on better with, and actually being recruited for jobs that are right for you as well. And I, you know, I definitely say to people, don't worry about pretending to be someone else. You know, be yourself. I think that's probably good advice for outside of work as well. But yeah, definitely for a career.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to find things that fit you, whether that's work or whether that's a group of people or whatever. If you're not sure what that fit is, if you're not sure who you are, and let's say if you're projecting yourself in a certain way, is that people will take you at face value, and then you will get offered roles that maybe make you a little bit uncomfortable, or you will end up in positions where you think, actually, this isn't for me. And I think
absolutely,
definitely early on in your career, when you're trying to figure out who that person is and how they turn up to work, is definitely more difficult. I think I certainly went through stages of thinking, you know, like, do I have to wear a suit, and do I have to be a specific way to be professional? You know, and I think all of us have suffered from that at some point, before realizing that actually, if you do turn up and you wear a suit every day, you're going to get jobs that give you suits. You know?
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And you know, I've been really lucky. I've had some really great advice from people as I've gone on, and that's definitely something that I've taken away and viewed. I think particularly strong women as well, being themselves, and not having, you know, what we may perceive as being negative to other people. And it's made a massive impact, and it's definitely something I would say to anybody.
Yeah, definitely. And so we kind of talked about the kind of advice you would give, and the kind of path that you've had to get here. What would your top 3 tips be for actually getting your foot in the door? So that first hire, you know, we talked about your first job, and sort of what skills do you think you need? What would your top tips be for getting that foot in the door?
I think for me, a big one is, as much as, you know, people get qualified and they train to do a specific job that they want, sometimes that just isn't possible at that time. And my advice would be, if you want to work, for example, you want to work in an aquarium and be a marine biologist, but there's not any animal care jobs, get any job in that attraction that they're hiring for. If it's a cleaner, if it's a talk person, if it's someone working in retail, all of those are great jobs. And what they will do is they will give you an understanding of that business. They'll give you an understanding of who works in that business. You can build those relationships. And when those jobs next come up, you're going to be at the forefront of people's minds, because you'll have spent that time, you know, networking with people, getting to know the business. And, you know, some of my best recruits have been people who have come in internally up the ladder. And, you know, you can teach people a lot of things. You can train people to do a lot of things in a lot of aspects of business, but them understanding how the business operates is such a huge thing to start off with. And that would be my first bit of advice, to just take any of the jobs that are available. And, you know, in your interview, say to people, you know, if I'm not a fit for this job at this time, I would really appreciate if you could let me know if you've got any other vacancies available. I guess my second point, which kind of ties in with that, is to be persistent. So just to give you an example, I was recruiting years ago for a senior aquarist position in an aquarium, and we had a very tight deadline. And there was someone on paper who I thought, this person's great, and we invited them to the assessment centre and interview, but unfortunately they couldn't make that date. But that was the only one we could do. And they followed up and they said, look, I'm working somewhere else, we're a bit short staffed, and if I take this time off, it's really going to leave them in the lurch. I will make any other date and day happen. And actually ended up thinking, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you're someone who doesn't want to let down your current colleagues. That's the kind of attitude that I like. And so I did interview them at a separate time. And they ended up being, one of actually the best people that's ever worked for me. And watching their career go on has been, an absolute joy. So I think having that persistence, I got turned down or really just didn't hear back from more than 20 jobs before I even got an interview. And you've just, it is disheartening sometimes, but you've just got to keep being persistent. And I guess the last piece of advice I'd say is to network with people, particularly I think if you're interested in a job, resources like LinkedIn, reach out to people who are in jobs that you want, or that you think you would like, and drop them a message and say, look, hey, I'm really interested in this career. I'm interested in the type of job that you do. What do you think has helped you the most? What courses, qualifications, videos have you taken part in or watched that you think would be beneficial for me if I wanted to get into this role? And I don't think there's enough of that. I don't see a lot of that going on, but I think it's really beneficial. And I've had a couple of messages from people on LinkedIn, and other sources, and it's been really nice. And I absolutely have taken the time to give them a bit of advice, because I would appreciate that coming to me, and I know other people that have been able to do that. So I think it's a really good tool. Go to conferences, even if you're not in the job. Pay for your ticket, get to the conference, just get chatting to people and meeting people.
Yeah, and I would absolutely second that. I think we've lost a lot of that one-to-one kind of connection somewhere along the line, because we're so used to now putting our CVs into online portals and answering online questions and doing, tests or whatever, is sort of, until you're in the interview room, sometimes you don't even know who's in the business that you're looking at. But I think there's still the personal connection really matters. And I think for a lot of people is just knowing somebody that has a connection to that industry is a massive thing. And I would say, before I got one of the jobs that was really important to my career, I absolutely paid for myself to go to a conference. And at the time it was a lot of money. And at the time, it felt like a real gamble, but it made a big investment in, I could have walked away from that 4 days with a number of people's contacts that, when I was then looking for another role, it came in really, really handy of just, being able to reach out to them and say hi. And I do think we've lost, you get told, not to do that stuff, but it's absolutely how people are getting jobs.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely, and even if you don't have a vacancy, you often know someone who has. That's happened to me before, where I've had someone that wasn't necessarily right for that job, but I was aware of someone else recruiting a similar position, and I've said, you should think of this person. Here's their details, and said to them, look, go and apply for this job. Or next time, people that I've thought, who was that person that applied for that role before? I think they'd be really good for this. And it's it's great to chat to people and get your name out there. It's really valuable.
Yeah, I think and it has to be genuine. I think from the other point of view of anyone who's listening to this thinking, oh great, I'm just going to smash loads of emails out to people on LinkedIn, is that make sure you are being genuine about it. I think everybody can smell a kind of, I'd like that job sort of reaction post, as opposed to someone who is genuinely interested, wants to have a chat, and to go in with the grace to think this might be absolutely useless to me. I might have a conversation with somebody and it not result in a job or a new network person, and just sort of prepare yourself for the disappointment. But I think in most cases you'll find it super, super useful.
Yeah, and I guess on the other side of that is you might end up having various conversations that lead you to think, actually, this probably isn't the career that I thought it was, and having a bit of a rethink. And that's as much as it might be disheartening, that's actually very useful in the long run, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you can avoid a lot of pretty rubbish jobs if you just sort of figure out if it's the role for you first. And I've had that in my career where I've been maybe 3 interviews into a process and thought, oh, actually, I'm really, even if they want me to be the person for this job, I'm just not going to be comfortable. It's a two-way street. It always is a two-way street. I think
absolutely. I think people in interviews forget that, asking questions in an interview is so important. And I think and I've been guilty of this. I get really nervous in interviews. And I just think, oh gosh, I really want to impress this person and all these people. But actually, I don't want to have a job that I don't like and that doesn't fit me. And you've got to find that fit both ways. Like you said, it's definitely a two-way street. And people should absolutely consider that and make sure that they ask the right questions and take time for themselves.
Yeah. And I think bit of advice for those people listening who maybe do the hiring as well is it's in your best interest to impress the person that you're trying to hire.
Yeah.
It's not a one-way street here. They can walk away as much as you can not give them a job.
Exactly.
Do you spend hours creating your rotas and then spend days constantly adjusting them? We have the solution. At Staff Savvy, we specialise in shift schedules and timesheet solutions for visitor attractions. Easily manage multiple complex teams of permanent, casual, freelance and volunteer staff across different locations and disciplines. With fast communication features, automatic compliance tools, training management and simple timesheet tools, Staff Savvy has been used and trusted by organisations such as V&A Dundee, the South Bank Centre and the Royal Albert Hall, with great cost-saving benefits. Visit us at staffsavvy.com/brown sign project to learn more and schedule a demo of our magic rota button.
You're listening to the Brown Sign Project podcast.
And so you kind of touched on it earlier, you had these roles kind of working your way through diving and aquariums, but that's not quite the role that you're doing today. So can you tell us about kind of the career, not necessarily change, but maybe a diversion to what you thought was going to be?
Yeah, it's it's an interesting one. So I had been doing a secondment, which was fantastic. And I got a really great opportunity to work in North America, met some amazing people. And when I finished that, I was going back to the job I was doing before in the aquarium industry, and felt a little bit like I just wanted a bit more of a challenge. And I wasn't really sure what that should be. And I wasn't in a crisis about it or anything like that. I was still lucky to be enjoying what I was doing. And I was approached about a job in safety with, wanting to fill a knowledge gap that they felt they had in terms of safety, specifically in the aquarium environment, around diving, around animal handling. Sometimes we have to move animals for various reasons, and obviously there's lots of things to think about with that. It's quite a lot of planning involved in all aspects, and some treatments we have to do and things like that. And my initial thoughts, to be honest, were I don't think that's for me, actually. But I thought, do you know what, let's have a conversation about it, find out a bit more. And so I ended up meeting with a person who'd been working in health and safety in all various aspects of the entertainment industry, such as rides and visitor attractions generally. And it just made me think, a lot of things that I would like to improve processes and procedures on, I could end up having quite a big impact on this if I was to take this role. And also, I was very aware that I was working in a very niche environment, and I think it's always been sort of drilled into me about being able to diversify and having flexibility and things like that. And I thought, well, I'll have the opportunity to learn new skills, to work with other areas of the entertainment industry. I might not like it, but I'm at a stage in my life where I've done this, and this quicker than I'd sort of envisaged myself doing it. And so I took a bit of a gamble, and it's really paid off. And I've been able to learn more skills, to work in other areas of the industry. And I think fundamentally for me, as a person and my personality, both in and out of work, I get a big kick from helping people. And I feel like in the role that I'm in now in safety, I get so many opportunities to do that, to help people, to help them think about different ways of doing things. And I've really enjoyed, not to blow my own trumpet, but to help people understand that, we're not necessarily people that stand around with a clipboard saying, yes, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. But using that experience I've had to say, okay, well, this could be better. I understand the environment that we need to apply these things in. And let's work together to come up with another solution, not just say, no, you can't do that. There's an element of danger, but how can we work together and understand this better? And it's been a real joy to learn. My first day, I remember driving down for my induction and thinking, oh gosh, what have I got myself into? I'm not, I don't know a lot about these other things, but I've been really lucky in having, a lot of support and, being able to take various courses that have helped. But ultimately, I think just being immersed in that environment and having good leadership to help me focus on what I need to achieve and when. So that's what I do now.
I love it. You made me laugh because you made me think of when people say about health and safety. And I think when we talk about health and safety, we kind of do have that idea that there's someone somewhere lurking saying, well, you can't do that,
Yeah.
and all the stuff that goes into risk assessing. And because I never had a job in safety, but when I ran an attraction, you have to do those things. You have
Absolutely.
to say, can we do it or not? And I think anyone who tells you, well, you can't do that because of health and safety, it's kind of just fobbing you off.
Oh, they absolutely are. And it's so frustrating, especially for someone like me who really want, and we might not be able to do it the way that you have envisaged, but we can do it in another way. I've been sat in an office before, and it was around Halloween, and I was just, working away, minding my own business. And somebody said in the office from me, said, oh, can we dress up in costumes for Halloween? And one of the managers said, oh, no, we can't because of health and safety. I sort of put my arms down on the table. Sorry, I can help with that. I don't necessarily have any issues.
Let me write you a risk assessment for that.
Yeah, let me help you all dress up, because I thought that's such a fun thing. And it's such, those things at work, I really feel like they make a difference. Those, like Christmas jumper day, it's such a harmless, easy thing, but it just makes the day more fun. And if we can do things like that, we absolutely should. And as I said, that's definitely an element of the job I enjoy, kind of changing those perceptions of health and safety. And it's been a really great journey to go on, and also just pushing myself more as well, in learning stuff. But yeah, you're right, that it is an easy kind of sentence for people when they don't necessarily want to do something, and they maybe want to sort of pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, I love the idea of like, we work in an industry where routinely people are jousting or doing sword displays or working with birds of prey, like infinitely, working with sharks, and like you say, like hand feeding animals that are, dangerous animals,
Yeah.
kind of over egg it, but they are not, it's not your dog and your cat that you're working with, and yet somehow we all manage, these
Absolutely.
these
and it's all about using, the expertise of those people who, maybe are unsure about doing something, and working with them and to understand it. And I think that's part of the fun, because you end up learning so much stuff. For example, doing stuff with rides, which wasn't my background, and I've learned really cool stuff about, how we even what happens before people even get on a ride and the ride's even built. It's a really interesting process. There's so many things going on in the attractions industry, but work with your health and safety person. They do want to help. They will help you.
They're not just going to say no, or they shouldn't do.
No, they shouldn't do.
And I'm such a nerd for it. I love I really have a fascination with rides in general, and people laugh at me for this because I really like rides, but I don't like roller coasters, and but I do find them fascinating. Like, I think one of the most interesting things I've ever seen, like if anyone's been on Hex at Alton Towers.
Oh, I love Hex.
Well, I've ridden it once and I will not go back.
You're missing out. It's great. I love Hex. It's actually one of my favorites.
I'm extremely motion sick, so it was not a great idea for me. But watching it, how it operates, watching it from the back and seeing the tech that goes into it is incredible. Really, really cool experience.
It's a really great ride, actually. It's one of my favorites. It's actually one of the only ones my husband can go on as well, because he's roller coasters and him don't agree with each other either. But yeah, because in overall, it's actually quite a simple concept, but the effect, without spoiling it for anyone who hasn't been on it, the effect of it is brilliant, and you're sat there thinking, hold on a minute, how's this working? I love things like that. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I think anyone who hasn't ridden it needs to get themselves to Alton Towers and
definitely
have a ride, because it's an interesting concept.
It's a really good one.
And so I imagine kind of your job, maybe not day to day, is quite stressful, but in terms of, when you've got these big projects on, when you're traveling, you are under quite a lot of pressure. There's a lot of responsibility that sits on your shoulders. Do you think you enjoy that pressure, and how do you kind of handle that when it gets a little bit too much? Like, what would your advice be for someone who is in a high pressure role, or maybe thinking about getting into those more responsible positions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in any job there is an amount of stress. I think when I've worked, probably the most stressed I have been is when I have worked with opening a new attraction from scratch. Deadlines, multiple contractors, things like that. And I think as well, then coming into the health and safety role, there's always that element of local legislation that you also need to fit, and understanding what that is in various countries. To be honest, my main advice, I think to some people, would probably sound counterproductive, but it would be that you have to take breaks. If that's going for a 20-minute walk, if it's not looking at your phone on your day off, if it's just stepping away for 5 minutes and having a cup of tea, I think it absolutely refocuses you and helps you concentrate to your best ability. I've spoken to people before, and they're on a Monday morning and they're like, oh, I've worked all weekend, I'm so tired, I don't really know what I'm going to be doing today. And I think I've been guilty of it. And it gets to a point where, I've had it in the past where I've had so many things on that I've just sat, at my computer, just sort of staring at my screen thinking, what am I going to do? What should I start with? And then before you know it, an hour's gone by and you actually haven't done anything because you've just been so tired. And so taking those breaks is so important to help you refocus on things. And I think people get a bit afraid to do that because they've got so much on, but you can't tackle things unless you're refreshed. And I think alongside that, one thing that I've got quite good at, and that helps me a lot, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody, but is organizing my diary. I have calls and meetings that are at certain times, but then I have a list of tasks that I need to do, and I will just block out time. At this time between 10 and 11 I'm working on updating this policy, then I'm working on this, working on that. And that really helps me, because I think otherwise you end up having a jobs list and you spend an amount of time just going, what shall I do next? What should I start with? Yeah. And you save a massive amount of time, I think, in taking half of that time to just go through your diary for the week and go boom, 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 that then. That's how I think I've dealt with it, and it works for me.
I think a bit of a shout out. There is a great book called Indistractable by Nir Eyal, which if you haven't read it, I would go and read it. It's a pretty practical book about how you stop yourself being distracted. You know, that there's times when you find you are under a lot of pressure, and like you say, you sit and sort of stare at stuff for an hour and think, actually, that hour could have been productive. And actually, it could have been productive with rest. Like, if I'd actually just spent that hour, I don't know, reading a book or painting or whatever, it actually would have been more productive than the hour spent stressing that I wasn't being productive. It's just a very, very interesting book about how you schedule your time better.
That's a good tip.
It's a great book. If people want to, I'll put it in the show notes for people to check out. But it's definitely a good sort of set of actionable things that you can do to really start to plan your diary, because exactly the same, like if you've got 10 hours of work to do but you spend an hour trying to figure out which one to do first, you could have done that hour, you know, a lot better, a lot quicker. Definitely.
Exactly.
And stopping yourself, like you say, kind of adding that extra pressure of, I've now got to make a decision. If you can make that decision when you're not under pressure, that relieves some of the pressure when things are getting a little bit hairy and you need a bit of a
it does. And I think actually probably one other thing I should say is that asking for help is absolutely not a problem. I've been really lucky. I've had a string of really supportive managers, and there's been times in my career where I've wanted to say yes to everything because I want to help people. But actually, you can say yes, but say, look, I am going to help you with this, but I've got these other things on, and so can we look back at this at this time? And I've said to my manager before, look, I've got, this is what I've got on at the minute. This task that you've given me, is there any flexibility on the time of that? It doesn't happen all the time, but I've never had a conversation like that where a manager's gone, absolutely not. I need this at this time. If anything, the other way of what can I pick up for you? What can I do to help you? And so absolutely ask, for support. And even if that's just to say to somebody, I've got these tasks, I'm not sure which one to start with. Can you help me kind of prioritize them?
Yeah, because I think as well, like say, if you struggle to prioritize, having someone else do it for you is actually really refreshing.
Absolutely.
Just even if you do it randomly, these things are going to take you a couple of hours. Just chuck them in, just put some numbers against them and draw them out of a hat, like whatever it takes to help you. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Buy a nice hat, put some things in it.
See, this is where Indistractable tells me, don't now go and look at hats.
Don't go online shopping for hats for 2 hours if you've got jobs on. Get someone else to buy the hat for you.
Yes, delegate the hat buying. That's the top tip for everybody. Delegate the hat buying. Speaking of top tips, actually, that is my next question. So we talked about kind of getting into the industry, but do you think there's any particular skills or things that you've done that sort of have made your life working in the industry better, or things that you think, oh, I wish I'd known that like way back?
Yeah, I think flexibility is really important. And actually, if what I was just saying about changing my career path, I think being flexible with people, for example, if you work in an attraction and you think, well, I want to do the animal talks in the aquarium in this attraction. I don't really want to operate a ride. By being flexible and helping other people out in their departments, because you are all one team in a big attraction or a theme park or something like that. You actually might end up finding something that you really love that you didn't know about. And it also helps show that you're a good team worker, and I think then can lead on to other career prospects and things like that, and I think it's really good in the industry generally, and I think that tallies in as well to kind of seeking out relationships as well, and a lot of roles aren't advertised. I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's actually a very high percentage of roles in the industry that you will never see come up. But if you've spent that time networking, seeking out relationships, chatting to people, going to conferences, whether they're just in your attraction or a group of attractions around you, if you've got affiliations in the city you're in with other things like that, that helps you progress and or just doing courses and feeling more comfortable in that industry. And I think probably my last piece of advice would be that it's really important when you're in the industry to develop those around you. I think there's a lot of people who think, well, I'm good at this job, I'm doing it really well, I want the job security, and so I might keep all this kind of stuff to myself and want to make sure that I'm needed. And I've been guilty of feeling like that. You think I want people to come to me and to know that I'm there to help and want to be a valuable asset, but it ends up meaning you can never have a day off, you can never have a holiday, and I think that although it takes time and effort, and sometimes you feel like we were saying about being stressed, sometimes you feel like you just don't have that spare second, but there's so much joy from developing somebody and seeing them grow and seeing their career path, and it really does help you out. And if anything, it gives you more job security because people can see that you're a team player, and they see that actually you as maybe more of a leadership role if that's not something you're already in, and working in that kind of area. I worked with someone years ago who has ended up carving a very successful career in HR and learning and development, which isn't something they went into, but they were in a rides background, and they had developed a lot of members of their team to go on and do other things, and that was then spotted by this other team that they weren't really aware of. Actually, we think you'd be good in an L&D role, and yeah, I think that's really important to do, and put that effort into developing those around you.
And I think that is when people are in that position, like I say, where they sort of squirrel their skills away and then try and hold on to that, is you really make a rod for your own back, because Absolutely. When you need those skills in other people, or you, let's say you want a day off, you want to go on holiday, is that you get stuck. And we have this kind of running joke in the podcast, is like people come into the tourist attraction industry and then they can never leave. You don't want to be in a position where you can never leave,
Yeah.
One day you're going to want to move on, and you're not going to want to leave people in the lurch, and you're going to need those skills of those people around you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you also never know when those people might surpass you and be your boss. And I think that is a lot of thing that we forget when we're younger, is we have kind of a cohort of people that we maybe start our careers with, we graduate at the same time, and they kind of feel like competitors. But at some point, you'll be ahead, they'll be ahead, whatever it might be. But you can help each other out,
Absolutely. It doesn't cost anything to be nice. And I think that's one of the reasons I love the industry, because there's so many people with passions about different things. Like, I'm really passionate about animals, you're really passionate about rides. And you end up making a lot of friends at work in this industry, because you all have passion, sometimes shared, or just passion for the industry as a whole. And being kind to people and helping them out really costs you nothing, and actually, like you said, you never know what's going to happen in the future, and that you don't do yourself a disservice and squirrel everything away, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. You kind of touched on you're doing great and leading me into the next question, which is
brilliant.
So that's that. What is your why? Like, what motivates you? We've touched on quite a few things through the podcast, but what kind of gets you out of bed in the morning nowadays?
Yeah, it's helping people for me. If I can improve the process, if I can make their life easier, if I can step back and see people really enjoying an experience because we've made it possible and we've made it safe, it's just it's so fantastic. And I think the variety as well of this industry, and the company that I currently work for, is brilliant. You know, and there are tasks that, you know, maybe can be repetitive that I think come with every job. But ultimately, you know, if someone asked me to explain a standard week at work, I could to an extent, but I'd get to a point where I'd struggle because there's just so many things, and it's, you know, it's this is happening over there, that's happening over there. I'm helping someone with this, and then we're doing that, and you know, we're trying to look at this. You know, how can we put somebody underwater reading a book to a group of school children, and you know, they're underwater, the children obviously aren't. You know, things like that, and it's just like, this is so fun. Like, it's just, you know, it's just great. And you know, if you can see, as I said, seeing that the outcome of that, to me is just, yeah, it's really fantastic. And it probably sounds a bit cheesy, but you know, I'll never forget the first, you know, aquarium I was the curator of, and on opening day when people came through, and you know, seeing them with their noses up against the glass, like wowing at things, it's this, you know, the sense of achievement just wiped away all of the stress that had, you know, sort of preceded it. And it's a great kick.
Yeah, I always say to people, like, that first day feeling will never be beaten.
Yeah,
the difference
absolutely.
is in our industry is you get up and, you know, you do it again the next day and the next day and the next day.
Yeah. And I think that the thing for me about that, the next day is still having that variety, which is, you know, really helpful for me. And yeah, as I said, something that definitely gets me out of bed.
It's always day one. You always get to open the doors afresh.
I do sometimes feel like it's day one, in a good way, and in a slightly kind of, how am I going to approach this day? But that's all part of the fun, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. We are at the end of our questions, so it's been fantastic to talk to you.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you on LinkedIn and ask you those questions, which I'm sure they will now because you've said that they can? Where can people get hold of you?
I would love nothing more, actually. So I'm on LinkedIn as Lucy Handel Tendler, or you can find me on Instagram at Scubaloo. Either of those, please do reach out. I as I said, I really would love to help anyone with any questions. Nothing would give me more pleasure.
That's great. Thank you very much. We'll include links to those social media as well in the show notes, so people can definitely find you and see what adventures you've been up to, because I think they'll be surprised at the variation of things in your day.
Yeah. There's a lot of aquatic stuff and an occasional bike thrown in on Instagram, but hopefully it's not too dull.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Brown Sign Project. In our next episode, we talk to Alistair Otto, Associate Commercial Director of the Science Museum Group. Thanks again to our series sponsors, Staff Savvy and Stephen Spencer and Associates. The Brown Sign Project was edited by Paul Tyler. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Brown Sign Pod.